So now, I lied earlier. Now we're going to learn Toolkit. Okay, we're going to go through all the Toolkit routines you're going to need for the next exercise. And when I said you're not going to do any coding, I lied as well. You're going to code a uStart, IInput, LSelect. I can't even remember any of the routines. No, we're not going to do Toolkit, but we are going to build a Toolkit window library. This section is about building UI Toolkit libraries, but its purpose is to actually introduce additional concepts and simple concepts that can be related to other types of building requirements that you've got. We don't ship or provide a standard Windows library template, so you can't just go into Visual Studio and say right-click, create new project, window library type, please. But we're going to create a project that will allow us to build window libraries from Windows scripts. We need our project to be aware of changes to Windows script and also to changes for the repository, because the Windows script relies on the repository to be able to incorporate its information into the input forms and all that kind of fancy stuff that it builds. So if something changes in the repository or something changes in a Windows script that's in our Windows script window library project, then we want the build mechanism to rebuild everything. To provide the ability to build a non-project target, we're going to basically simply use built-in build events, pre and post build events. We're going to create a project that we are not interested in the target or the results of that project. It could create anything. It could create a mainline program. It could create a .NET console application. Doesn't matter. All we're bothered about is the resulting window library. We're going to be building the UI Toolkit window library from Toolkit scripts. And you don't use Toolkit, doesn't matter. It's going to give you an idea of what you may be able to do and build in a non-sort of standard project format. And this is a simple solution. Like with everything in computing, there's 1,000,001 ways to do everything. This is a very simple way. We're not going to try and dig into the hearts and the guts of MS Build infrastructure at all. We're just going to use simple projects and change the way they do things so they build things the way we want them to build. A UI Toolkit window is quite simple. It's literally a Synergy ISAM file that contains records that define how UI elements like menus, input forms, and lists look. Simple as that. The window library, for those of you who don't use UI Toolkit, is built using a Windows script compiler. It's just a regular Synergy program, and you say, here's a repository, here's a script, compile it into a window library. It's all very simple. As I said, the Windows script compiler takes the Windows script one at a time, and together with the repository, we'll take and merge the two together and create the required records inside the window library. And those records, as I say, are menu columns, input forms, list. In your UI Toolkit programs, you basically open the window library in a normal, it's just an ISAM file, you just open it in the normal way. Load the UI elements using the UI routines, iludimp, and display them, put them to the screen, and allow the user to process them. And as I said, we don't provide an out-of-the-box solution to building window libraries, so we don't have a window library project, but we can still build window libraries from scripts, and that's what we're going to have a go at. So basically, we're going to create a standard project type, just one of the ones that's available in Visual Studio. For example, a simple console application. We don't need to worry about what that console application does or what that project creates, what the output of it is, because it's a window library we really want. So as long as we can do something that we'll actually build, we can create our window library as part and parcel at the side. We're going to have to add some dummy code files to the project so it will actually build, because if it didn't build, it wouldn't build our window library. But as I say, we're not interested in what it looks like. We can add Windows scripts to the project. Adding them as content files means that the build system will not try and build them, but it will recognize if we've made changes. So if we change a content file, the build system says, oh, that is used inside this project, therefore that project or this project needs to be rebuilt. So if we change the Windows script file, that'll cause our window library project to build. And that will cause our scripts that we're going to create to actually do the building of our window library. Editing the Windows scripts is of course possible in the Visual Studio environment, but you won't get any IntelliSense. We don't recognize the internal structure of a Windows script file. And unlike the Synergy repository file, there are certainly no plans that I know of afoot to enable that. The next stage is going to be to define some pre-build events. The nice thing about Visual Studio, it can tell you when it's about to build something or when it's finished building something. We've got these pre-build and post-build events. And we're going to use both throughout the day, but this exercise we're going to look at the pre-build events. So to ensure that the window library is built when associated projects are built, we can define build dependencies. So we can reference repositories and we can also put dependencies between other projects as well. Other issues may come to light now you're moving into the Visual Studio development environment, especially if you've come from a workbench environment. Things like we don't support running the Synergy Composer from within Visual Studio as we do through Workbench. So you're going to have to figure that one out yourself, okay? That's not the focus of today's presentation or workshop. Adding the required projects to the existing solution is very, very simple. We use the Add Project option and display our project templates dialog. Now, when you're in Visual Studio, it's quite common when you're doing this workshop to, instead of going File, Add, New Project, you go File, New Project, okay? But if you do File, New Project, it'll create a whole new solution and project and it won't fall under the solution that we've created. So make sure you go, move your eyes down the File menu and find the Add and then New Project. And that will add it to the current solution. Life will be good. There are a number of different project types we could use. And remember here, we're not interested in the results of the project type at all, or the output from that project. We just need the ability to run our build scripts, so we can run our script compiler. So for the workshop, we're going to create a Synergy DE Windows console application. It will ultimately create a little executable that does nothing. But as I say, we're not interested in that executable that does nothing. But we can name the project to reflect what it's building. So for example, we may well call it Window Library. That would be a novel idea. And adding it to the current solution, make sure it all fits in the current folder structure that we've got. As I said, we've got a dummy program. This program will do nothing, there's no code in it, but it does need to build, okay? We do need to be able to build something or our build events won't fire correctly. And in fact, the code you see here and in the feed, it's just the generic code that's created when you create a console application project through Visual Studio. We're not going to change it, it's just going to build as is. But now we have the capabilities to have a project that will just build, and we can add window scripts to that project. And we can add window scripts just as you can add any other types of files to any sort of project. Now, when you get the download of the files, you're going to move the files into the project folder for the workshop. And I think there's two. There's one called maintenance and there's one called system.wsk. So move those into the project folder, not the solution folder, but the window library project folder that you create. And then we can select the add existing items so we can find the files and add them into our project inside Visual Studio. A couple of notes here, you'll get this add existing dialog up. There's a big yellow ring at the top that says window library. Please ensure, and the instructions highlight this on a number of occasions. Every time you're doing add reference or add this or add that, it says, please make sure you're adding this to the right project, because if you click in the solution folder into a different project and then go to the file menu and do project add reference, you'll add it to the wrong project, okay? So there's an indication up here. If it doesn't say window library, stop what you're doing, cancel the dialog, highlight the window library project and do project add. Now if you want to right click the project inside the solution and do add from there, that's fine. But I've made the instructions as simple as I could because not knowing who uses Visual Studio and who doesn't. So that's just an FYI. Just make sure it's the right project you're adding it to. Now because this is a standard Synergy console application, the default files it expects to load into this project are known Synergy types. So when you add files to a project of a known type, i.e. Synergy DE console project, it's expecting you to add DBL files, source files. So at the bottom where the other ring is, where it says the file type, normally that'll say Synergy file types, which are star.dbl, star.dbc and a couple of others. DBL, def, inc, etc. Change that to all files, otherwise you won't see your WSC files, your WSC, Windows script files. Once you see those, as we have here, you can see the maintenance and system.wsk files. Highlight the two files, add them to your project. It's real simple. By default, these files should be brought into the project with a build action of content. But let's just be belt and braces and double check. When you highlight files inside the Solution Explorer, if you have the Properties window up at the same time, you will see the properties associated with the file. If you don't have the Properties window, go to the View menu, find the Properties entry, click it, the Properties window will be displayed somewhere. I can't tell you where, because it depends how your Visual Studio is configured. So drag it, pin it, dock it, do something so you can see it. Okay? And then just double check your maintenance.wsk and your system.wsk and make sure that you've got this build action of content. And as I say, you may need to pin that properties window somewhere, but it's very easy to do. Now it's time to create a build script. And this is a relatively simple but long-winded script, quite verbose, and primarily because there's a lot of logging to trace any issues, because it's not the easiest of tasks to actually debug this stuff. The basic structure in that script file basically loops through all the Windows scripts it files in a particular folder and processes each one individually. Okay? It's not doing anything clever or fancy, it's just saying, I've found a Windows script, I'm going to compile it into a window library. I found another Windows script, I'm going to do the same. This is a very simple script. Your development environment may have multiple scripts in multiple folders that need to be compiled in multiple different ways at multiple different times. The chances are you've got a script file that does that today, okay? Unless you're using Workbench and the building capabilities inside that. If you have got a script, you'll be able to bring it into this environment very easily. All script files located in the project folder are built into the window library. We only have the two. Life is good. So we're going to create the script, we've got the script, now we're going to define how and when we execute it, and we're going to use a pre-build, or create this as a pre-build event. Build event scripting is found on the project properties page, or project properties dialog under the build events tab, as we can see on the screen. The script that we're going to write accepts 3 command line arguments. The first is the solution directory, that's the root, that's where we know where we're going to build things from, to, etc. This allows the script to basically understand where the window library folder is going to be located and created. The second is the project folder. We need to know where the script files physically reside, so we'll pass the project folder to the script. Then it'll know where to find the script files to build into the window library. The third argument is a temporary folder where we can pass to the script, and then the script file will log any processing or errors into that temporary folder. If you notice on the screen, we're enclosing the folder specifications with double quotes. This is to ensure that if you've got spaces, that the command line will still work. Spaces in your folder names. So my space, documents space, I space, being space, really space, difficult space, folder space name. It should handle that quite nicely. Now, you can enter the command directly into the pre-build command entry field that you can see slightly in the background, or you can press the Edit Pre-Build button and you get a slightly larger dialog to enter into. Both do exactly the same. Now the final step is to ensure that the window library builds when associated projects are updated. The window library project is dependent on the repository, because if we change a repository, we might change a prompt against the field in the repository. We want that to be recognized when we build our window library and run the application. So as I say, the window library is dependent on the repository. If we change anything in the repository, that should force the window library to build. From the project menu, we can select the project dependencies and bring up the project dependencies dialog. So in here, in this dialog, we can link projects together simply by selecting the one that, if it's changed, will cause this project to build. So checking on the on-vinyl repository ensures that if we change the repository, the Windows script will build. And we'll see the results of that dependency in a future exercise. What you'll get is the results. If you navigate to, when you've finished the exercise, I think it actually tells you to do this. It will have created a folder called WinLib underneath the solution folder, and inside that you'll see the window library ISAM files. Okay? Very simple, but whenever the repository changes, whenever a script file changes, that build will cause our window library to be created. So, This is what your exercise 2 is going to be like. A couple of caveats here. You won't notice this straight off and you'll wonder why the instructions keep telling you to do it, but keep doing it, keep checking. During the exercises, we'll talk about configurations and platforms. The configuration is either debug or release. We're going to be working in debug mode for the whole day, so you don't need to worry about that. Don't change it from debug. You can change it to release, but there's no point. It doesn't make any difference for us. The platform we're building in is x64, 64-bit. And as you can see on here, it's shown as 64. All projects must be in x64 mode for this to all work. And the exception is the repository. The repository should be and can only ever be in any CPU. Okay? So, as the exercises progress, and as I say, it will remind you every time. And the first few, you're going to wonder why it keeps reminding you to check that you're in x64 mode and not some other mode like any CPU. Because later projects that we create will be created in any CPU and not x64, so you will have to check it and change it. Okay, so make sure you're always in debug, you're always in x64, and as the instructions say, check that the platform is always x64 as well. So exercise 2, we're going to create a console application. We're going to download some script files, and we're going to then add those to our project. I did say you had to write the build script. You don't have to write the build script. We're giving it to you because it's quite long-winded and the chances are it would take you all day. So click the link to download the Windows script files, build those, add those to your project, then click the link to bring down the script file. Now the script file is a .bat file. Now when we've tested this elsewhere, we've not had a problem. Depending on the level of security you may have or not on your laptop, you may have an issue bringing down a .bat file. Remember, click the links, open it, copy them to the folders where the exercises say. Now, have you all got the link to the exercises? Okay.